This is the Moonlight Graham Show, a freewheeling conversation with the role players, the underdogs, and guys with flat-out great stories in sports.
Hello and welcome back to the Moonlight Graham Show, and our Moonlighter for today is a true underdog. He was a wrestler who wrestled at the University of Iowa, but unlike many wrestlers we've had here on the podcast, he wasn't one of those guys that was competing for national championships, really wasn't even competing for Big Ten championships, let alone trying to make the Olympic team. He was one of the ultimate role players on the University of Iowa's wrestling team during his time there from the fall of 2001 until the spring of 2006, and he also happens to be from the greatest town that God ever created, Fort Dodge, Iowa. His name is Adam Fellers. See, Adam Fellers, after finishing up a really successful high school wrestling career for the Fort Dodge Dodgers, went on to wrestle at the University of Iowa right after the Dan Gable era. So Jim Zaleski was actually the head coach at Iowa while he was there. The Brands brothers were actually assistant coaches for Iowa at that time. And Fellers came in as a guy that could wrestle anywhere between like 174 pounds and 197. And he did that during his time at Iowa. Whenever they kind of needed a guy at one of those weight classes, whether Fellers was 10 pounds too light, 20 pounds too light, he would step in to wrestle at that 197 weight class. And he actually had a couple of big-time wins when the team needed him most. And so I've always loved Adam Fellers' story as an underdog, and I'm excited to get it here on the podcast. Fellers today is married. He's got 4 kids, but he's still very involved in the wrestling world. He's an assistant coach over at Seabolt Academy, which is producing a lot of great top quality wrestlers. A lot of those guys are actually coming out of the town of Fort Dodge. Fort Dodge has always been a strong wrestling town. Fellers is one of those guys, but now is like the glory days of Fort Dodge wrestling, where it is turning out Division I high quality national talent on a year after year basis. And Fellers is a part of that development and also has a strong voice in the wrestling community here in the state of Iowa. So, of course, had to bring the trusted co-host Tommy Griffin back for that because he is, the wrestling voice here on this podcast. And it was fun to get Adam Fellers here on the pod as well. He's a couple years older than me growing up, but I went to daycare. I went to the same daycare as Adam Fellers, and he was in my neighborhood growing up. He probably pushed Tom and I off of our bikes maybe 5 to 10 times growing up, and it was just right then that I knew that I wanted nothing to do with the wrestling room, knowing that Fellers was a wrestler growing up. And that's probably, the difference in why I played basketball and Adam Fellers went on to wrestle for the Iowa Hawkeyes. So I think you guys are going to love this episode. Of course, special thanks to our sponsors, The People's Company. Check them out at peoplescompany.com, Andrew Zelmer and Matt Adams, and enjoy today's episode with Moonlighter, Adam Fellers. Moonlighters, are you or someone you know moving down to Kansas City? Well, if you are, the one realtor that we trust and yet you need to be calling is the great Brian Sandvig. As you well know, Brian Sandvig is our producer here on the podcast, and there is not a better residential real estate advisor down in the Kansas City marketplace than Brian Sandvig. Call Brian Sandvig, shoot him a text. Hey, DM us on social media. We'll get you connected with Brian if you can't find him on all the socials, but he is there and he is active, and he is your Kansas City realtor, so give him a call. 117 years ago yesterday, Moonlight Graham made his only appearance in the major leagues. Tonight, I got 2 wrestlers out on my deck, and we're recording this podcast under the moonlight. Tommy Griffin, the trusted co-host, is back, and our Moonlighter for tonight, Adam Fellers, the man of steel. Adam Fellers, welcome to the Moonlight Graham Show.
Thanks for having me, guys. Long time, kind of get the old neighborhood back together.
Yeah, exactly. I actually just showed up here to babysit. I came here to hold babies, and you gave me a microphone.
Fellers, I think the first time we met was at PS Academy. We always called it
I don't remember those
the
days.
Academy of Higher Learning. You were kind of the bully. You were the bully at daycare.
I probably stealing everybody's lunches. I don't know if I was a bully. But
I was the guy, I was the kid peeing his pants all the time, getting picked on at recess, and you were the guy catching beetles and getting in trouble. That's my first memory of Adam Fellers. Do you remember those days?
No, I remember it wasn't. I didn't really like going to that place. If you could get outside, but it was like entrapment. So I probably did whatever could do to get out of there, but I don't really remember it. I remember first real recollection I have is like you used to always have your hair done perfectly. Played a great shortstop, right? And then when we started doing kid pitch, I mean, he had a good fastball. You just had to sit back on it a little bit.
You couldn't touch me.
No,
You
but
still
if we
couldn't
did,
touch
then we pushed him down on his bike on the way home, or tried to. We chased him home. We had a good. Who was? We didn't have. What the hell is KJ? What's his name?
KJ.
Remember him?
Kevin Johnson?
Yeah,
Our coach?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I seen him a couple years
Or
ago.
Kyle Johnson.
Kyle Johnson.
Yeah, he was great. Yeah, my dad always would talk about PS Academy, and I had no idea when I was young because, like, you just do what your parents tell me. And now my dad will tell me, like, the smell of urine when you walked into that place, like, was appalling. And as a kid,
and it's across from the funeral parlor, I think,
from Brooks Funeral Home in Fort Dodge. So we were supposed to do this last night.
Yep.
And you weren't able to make it. Why is that?
We have our prep camp for Fargo Nationals going on right now. So our high school, our 2 tiers of high schoolers, are in Jefferson, Iowa, at the Seabolt Wrestling Facility for a week-long camp. It's 3 or 4 workouts a day, and fortunate enough to work with a lot of good kids. And we had 3 of the top coaches in NCAA wrestling in town looking at kids, trying to learn more about them. The recruiting battle, it's crazy. The coaches all try to play, they try to get the upper hand. And the position we really take is, we just answer questions, but it's really up to the kid. We're not going to sway one or the other. Every situation is going to be different for every kid. A lot of kids may have aspirations of playing D1 or wrestling D1. Some at the highest level, and some kids are just happy to be on the roster. And there's a fit for that everywhere. And just trying to get upfront expectations on all front. But it's when I say like a dream come true, I guess it's it's kind of cliche to say, but it's really awesome to be able to give the opportunity to get these kids to the next level if they so want to go on.
I know you guys are running a really successful thing over there at Seabolt, and you've had a lot of great wrestlers come out of there, and you guys have a great reputation, which is why guys like Cale Sanderson and John Smith and Brand show up at your guys' door to watch the wrestlers that are working out with you. Does the intensity in the room pick up a couple of notches when Cale Sanderson walks in?
You'd like to hope so, right?
I know it for me.
Sometimes, I think sometimes they try too hard. It kind of maybe becomes awkward, like it's a job interview. Maybe they get distracted sometimes. A lot of times the coaches try not to be. They're present, but try not to be a distraction. You try to think that they do, but you're probably a lot more critical watching when obviously from a coaching standpoint too. When you have those guys in the corners, like do I say something?
Don't say anything stupid.
No, like wonder what he's thinking now. Like, but you kind of get over that, and just get in your groove and just kind of do your thing. I think the best thing you can do on recruiting or anything is just be yourself.
Tommy, you're an accomplished wrestler in your own right. Were you ever in the room when like big time D1 coach walks in, whether it was Bobby Douglas back in the day or Jim Zaleski or anybody like that?
No. I wish I could say was probably the biggest wrestling coach I was ever in the same room as was Jimmy Allison. No, I'm just kidding. Our coach.
Man, I tell you,
hey, no. Jimmy Allison.
I love Jimmy Allison. And
wise guys.
Oh, I love Jimmy Allison. No, I coached my student teaching year. I volunteered at Ankeny, and when Dave Ewing was the head coach, and
great human being.
Just being around Dave Ewing.
Isn't Dave Ewing an Eagle Grover?
No, he's Dodger.
Dodger.
So
I knew there was some connection there.
Being around him. And then just there was a lot of talent in the room. Just being around, like it is different. It is really different. Now, no, I am not at all an accomplished wrestler, just so we clarify. But I did wrestle.
That's all. I think that's all. I think accomplished wrestlers, if you wrestled, I think
if you made it through a wrestling season, you accomplished something.
Because there's all different. Some of the most accomplished people in the sport have some of the biggest scars from it. Right, that haunt them every day, that they can't have closure with, that really lives with them forever because that's their only identity. and you have guys that, maybe not have the greatest accomplishments, but it impacted their life forever. So I think it's like any sports, how you leap forward once you're done with it, and can you be happy when you are done with it?
Yeah, we had Daniel Dennis on the podcast.
I know Daniel Dennis too well,
and he was one of those guys that like a big loss kind of messed him up for a while.
Dan Dennis showed up as a true freshman my senior year. He had an Amish bob haircut, and he had a cutoff thing like up to his, and he was getting ready to quit, but his effort was unbelievable. I mean, basically a walk on, wasn't a state champ to Olympian. He has a lot of demons that have lived with him, but hopefully he's put in the back view mirror now. He's head of the HWC club coach now, so.
Now, he and I were in a kickboxing class together at Iowa, so I really did see that edge when he was going off in PE
He's fucking
class.
Crazy, that's why. He's nuts. He's probably one of the strongest human beings you've ever seen in your life. He'll rip out like almost 100 pull-ups.
Wow.
Yeah.
Not the CrossFit kind either.
No,
like real
not
ones.
he doesn't do the kips, I don't think. And, he likes riding dirt bikes, and he likes drinking Jim Beam or what's it, black blue Johnny
Black Velvet. Oh, Johnny Walker.
Oh, yeah.
I thought you were going to say Black Velvet. I was like, whoa.
He would have fit in well from Fort Dodge.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Dirt bike guy?
I don't know if he'd have made it.
Well, let's talk about Fort Dodge, because Fort Dodge has a really strong wrestling tradition going back many, many years. And you got guys, I mean, before our time, like the Riles and then the Ayalas come along. And lately we've had this string of D1 guys coming out of Iowa that are coming out of Fort Dodge. Like you have Drake Ayala, Brody Teskey, the Bennetts,
Riles. Laras.
Lara. Yeah. I mean, it's incredible that the amount of talent that's come out of there lately. Adam, you were kind of at the forefront of that maybe 20 years ago. What is it about Fort Dodge that produces just tough kids and good wrestlers?
I think, I always say this, like high school programs for wrestling especially. There's not really a big secret. It takes a lot of work and community, but the integration from the youth level through the junior high to the high school. And I think at the time, you bring up Jim Allison and, Justin McClintock, and I get a lot of laughs about that, take your shoe off and throw it at you and,
Yep.
the switch. But we'd roll out mats at the YMCA and tape them. And but there was a strong youth program, right? And then as Jim was done and he coached, I think, St. Edmund High School, Troy Bennett and Sam Ayala and Nick Lara and those guys, they took their kids out to Iowa Central, and they kind of built a new youth program. So you have like an army, right? And Fort Dodge has kind of been known, as blue collar, and I read Eric Pratt's articles and tweets a lot when I give him shit about enrollment numbers. So if there, about we can't compete with enrollment. So it's kind of been a sport.
I read the Messenger every day too.
I get it delivered to my house actually. It's kind of a sport that's kind of taken its own, and you own your own destiny. You can go anywhere to the state. Fort Dodge, you go to a Dodger wrestling meet, and the fans are pretty educated, right? The alumni sticks around, but what's happened the last maybe call it 10 or 12 years is pretty remarkable. To have a kid that's the best in the country, top two. We just talked about Caden Proctor, which is the number one at a position. I mean, Drake was top 2, top 3 in the country total class. And you're gonna have a kid coming, his brother's coming up, but you're gonna have a kid coming up that's gonna be a freshman this year. That
is that the Ross kid?
Yeah, I mean, I watched him wrestle. We had simulations yesterday. He's again going in freshman, and he's beating 220, 195 pound state champs that are seniors or graduating, just going as a freshman.
And how big's this kid?
195 pounds.
Oh wow,
incredible.
Does he play football?
I don't know. I mean, I think Vinny coached him last year, Nick Vincent, and put him at like fullback, and I'm like, what the hell, Vinny? That's a typical Vinny move, right?
I coach against Nick Vincent in 8th grade football.
Hey, listen, that was an easy win, right?
I wish I could say yes.
I mean, he's just a freak. But, we have a lot of those kids now that Seabolt moved over to Jefferson, 40 miles away. Probably 20 kids from Fort Dodge come to the club. So it's a kind of good feeder program, and Bobby Thompson's done a good job. Kind of like saying, okay, you guys want to go here, and kind of makes his job a little bit easier, right? I don't know. I always say this. Anytime, like if we were growing up, if we had someone we grew up with, Nick Collison, right?
Yep.
So if you're growing up watching Nick Collison and you wanted to play NCAA Division I basketball, right? And you see Nick do it, right? It's not like a dream, like this thing that's a stretch. When you can see, touch, feel, be around something, growing up, it makes it's not a dream anymore. It could be realization.
It's attainable.
And I think that's what's happening in the wrestling community in Fort Dodge.
I think so. About 20 years ago, when we were in high school, which is hard to say because we all look young and we look great. I mean, honestly, we look great. But when we had the SE duels, we would have to take all our mats out of the room and we'd set up for the youth tournament. So we would go practice at senior high for like 1 day a year. And I remember like Jimmy getting us ready, Coach Allison getting us ready for that practice because it was like we're gonna go over there and it's not the same. Like we're gonna go. Because we didn't have a full varsity lineup at times, and you guys obviously bigger school, bigger program, and more successful at that time for sure, and currently. But like, it was getting ready, and so we would talk about like, okay, when we get over there, this is what we're going to do, and this is how it's going to be, and so we would get ready for practice and go over to senior high. And I remember it would have been like, were you and Pat Schmalin in the same class? Were you both? So maybe it was your junior year, maybe it was your senior year that he placed. And I just remember because we were the same weight class, and I'm like, oh my God, he was huge. Yeah. He was way taller than me. I just remember getting ready for this practice. No, I didn't. You
were already beat before you got there.
Yeah, exactly. I was already beat before I got there. No, but I just remember like that culture, that intensity, and then having
it's
guys on guys on guys.
It's the new guys coming in, right? It's like, which was really stupid on our part, right? Like you look at that stuff now, it's like the division and tension built. Like, listen, we're all from the same town. You know what I mean?
But it's kind of fun to have rivals.
It was.
I mean, I guess, but it's like we weren't ever competing against each other. You know what I mean?
No, we never were at the same tournaments. But I do remember, like so I was like freshman, sophomore when that would have been like 01, 02, and that was different. And then 03, 04 when I'm an upperclassman, then I had a lot more. I could handle. I don't know who it was. I could compete with that guy though, or whatever.
That's the other thing about wrestling is like, I don't know what you guys like to do outside of like following baseball, and I don't know what else you guys do, but anytime you can see yourself making progress or getting better at something, you enjoy doing it, right? Mm-hmm. So when you put in X and you see results of Y, it's something you enjoy doing. Well, wrestling directly correlates that. You kind of control your own destiny, and it's not like politics or all that bullshit that goes on in sports now, which is a whole other nightmare.
You ended up at Iowa.
Yeah.
And this is right after Gable was done.
Coach Gable, yes.
So Coach Gable was done, and
Zaleski was got
second year, third year.
Second year, they got second. They got second at Carver to University of Minnesota. Minnesota had 10 All-Americans in Carver, and I don't think anybody won a national title. Eric Jurgens did, and they went 1 for 4, I think. And
the dark days of Hawkeye wrestling, right there.
It was dark, man, and it's when you can hear. If you heard this saying, "The prisoners take over the prison,"
yeah,
it's kind of what happened.
In what way?
I mean, it was Jimmy was never really set up for success, right? Like, I mean, anybody's taking over after Gable, the expectations are through the roof. People expect, and Gable wasn't. I mean, I still talk to Coach once a week. Gable wasn't a dummy. Like, he knew what was like. Okay, I didn't leave the cupboard all the way dry, right? But kind of what was coming. My recruiting class was like second or third. We had Mako and had, which I lived with for 3 years. I could tell you stories about him. But it kind of just fell off. There was a huge tension between Coach Brands and Coach Zaleski, so it was like a divided locker room. Like, you either were Gable or you're either Brands guy or Zaleski guy. And, of course, this is the same team. So you're 18, 19 years old, right? There's already a division. There's not a unity coming in. Tom thought he should get the job. He says he was totally not ready for it, immature, but in his mind, he thought he was going to get the job, right? So it's kind of that tension. Well, you've got a frayed locker room. You're already trying to find yourself as an 18, 19-year-old kid. You got basically a full-time job thrown at you. You get the shit beat out of you at practice. You still got to go to school. No one cares. There's no one to go. You're not going to go home and cry on anybody's shoulder. And you grown up, and it's easy to fall off. And when Coach Brands left and went to Virginia Tech, it was a huge blow. It was hard Coach Hartung, Tim Hartung came in. He's from Minnesota. Known Hawkeye hater his entire career, right? It was a huge rivalry. And then Coach Troy Steiner came back from, I don't know where he was at, but maybe Oregon State at the time, actually, and he came back with Jimmy, who was ex-Hawkeye. But it was just, like, I'll give you, like, an example. If we had to go study RL for, like, 4 hours a week or 5 hours a week, or the punishment was you had to do, like, an hour in the sauna for a workout if you didn't go, like, all right, well, we'll just take the hour. Like, fuck, it's easier. And it was just kind of like we didn't have a good leader at the time. Mako was a freshman. And, today we tell the kids, either you're adding to something or taking it away, right? And we didn't have that leader to sway us that way, so we kind of went the other way.
When Gable retired in '99, was he completely removed, or was he still hanging around a little bit?
He came in the room every day. He was actually the associate athletic director for, I think, 3 years.
So when he's in the room every day,
yeah, it's kind of like it's kind of Big Brother.
Is he still running the show, or
no? You just basically, he's observing, but having conversations. It just wasn't a good. I think everybody could look back now 20 years and say it wasn't a great situation for anything to happen to be super successful.
So you were really successful, especially your last 2 years of high school. What was that transition like going into the Iowa wrestling room? I mean, you were third in state junior and senior, right?
Yep.
And you had like one loss your junior year or senior year?
One loss, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so you were super. What was the change like? You just talked about the Fort Dodge wrestling room a little bit. What was it like walking into that room in Iowa City?
Like when they called me, Coach Brands called me like middle of my senior year. It was like I was calling me, like, you know what I mean? It's like, what? The transition was huge, and at first you're just kind of starstruck, like you're just happy that you're part of the team, right? And this is the thing that, like, as a coach now, you're like, you try to relive that, but and understand have some empathy towards your athletes now, just every situation going on. But you're glad you're part of it. But then once after a week and you get the shit beat out of you, it's like,
right, you got to change your mindset.
But you're like, okay, what did I get myself into, right? And then it's kind of like you either sink or swim. Division I wrestling is the biggest attrition sport in Division I, as far as people that start and don't finish. So like you said earlier, I didn't have a big circuit. Some of the biggest badasses that I ever met my whole life are guys that came to the room every year for five years, didn't miss practice, and had a role in the team, and they never were the guy, never made the national tournament, never were a starter, but they were part of what made the ship go. Yeah.
Was there any moments when you're getting the crap beat out of you that you're like, man, this ain't for me?
No, and I don't think that's part of what, I've never been like I've always been the underdog in everything, and that's if you quit, like, if you get an opportunity like that, you say it's as a wrestling growing up, it's to be every kid's dream to wrestle the University of Iowa, right? If you quit on yourself on that, when anything gets tough in life, I've just never been a quitter. Good, bad, or indifferent, maybe sometimes stupid, but it's something that is at your core. I mean, I'm still like that with my kids. Like, wherever you start, you're going to finish. You may not like it, may not be going your way. I don't like, because it doesn't matter what it is. If they quit this, then that's you're just ingrained in their head. Okay, the next thing. Like, struggle is what makes all of us.
What was your best day as an Iowa wrestler?
Probably the first day I walked in.
Ooh. And it just went down from there?
No, I mean, like, I guess you could say, like, you could gauge it, like, on performance, right? Like, oh, I won, like, match-wise, again, Minnesota duel, won the duel. That was pretty cool, and, whatever, front page. But I'd say my first day, because it was, like, that was confirmation that what I've done up to that point earned me a ticket into the most prestigious, wrestling program on a scholarship. And nothing I would ever envision even 12 months before then.
Yeah, you come in, third place finisher 2 years in a row, and then you mentioned Mako, who you lived with for 3 years. Like, I'm not a wrestling nerd by any means, but I know who Steve Mako was, and I knew who he was when he was 18, and he was a big deal. He was a force. What was it like to be him being on one end of the spectrum? Like,
most number one recruit, hands down, like in the country, period.
Yeah, and then you're like, who's this guy? He didn't even win a state championship?
Yeah. He I'll try to say this. Steve had a unique life growing up. I mean, his dad obviously went to prison for racketeering. He was part of the mob life, like in Jersey. Went to prep school. They basically created this persona. Like if you Steve has 2 sons. One, his oldest is same age as my oldest, but see him at tournaments. He's like 225 now.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, what's going on, bro? Like I could. This sounds. I guess Mako came into Iowa, like into Polk County, and I could smell him from here to there, like no problem. He had this persona that he'd set his alarm like 4 times during the night to either eat or drink like 3 boosts. You heard because they had his mind that he had to weigh 285, right? They created this persona that he was this big mean asshole, basically like a Mike Tyson. He created all this fear in all his opponents, right? But he's the biggest teddy bear in the whole world. Like he would never put that on externally, but I think it was such a huge weight off his shoulders. He transferred to Oklahoma State
Right.
when Tom left. That kind of put the corkscrew. I never met a guy, especially of that size, that I've ever seen work that hard in my life. He lost to Tommy Rollins, his true freshman year, got ruled out in the tiebreaker, and him and Tom Brands were at Carver Hawkeye Arena the next morning at 5:15. We had called stair laps. You go up one stair, go over, down, all the way around Carver, okay? And he did 2 stair laps with a full dummy on his back.
Jeez.
He didn't get beat because of work. I think that one of my good friends, Mark Perry, say this a lot, and you can see I could name 50 people that happens. Iowa wrestling, if you're not yourself, if you can't be yourself at Iowa wrestling, it'll steal your soul. Meaning that you try to project something that you're not for so long to try to be accepted, and at some point there comes a crossroads where it's like you can't operate under this persona that you've created, but you also don't want to expose yourself. And once it's done, most time it doesn't end well. Like career wise, it's a huge load off their shoulders.
Wrestling obviously is known for just crazy workouts, cutting weight, running the stairs like you were saying at Carver Hawkeye with the dummy on your back. At what point is there like diminishing returns from these crazy workouts?
I think now, like, it's like anything. If you're not, I don't know, like baseball, like the amount of technology and resources out there available now, just even at the youth level for us, it's like, okay, everybody's not the same, right? So you have a baseline testing, you have a bunch of neurotrans things you can test, like, okay, here's your lifting plan, here's what you have for your metabolism. None of that was available before. I would say in wrestling, though, the law of diminishing returns is it's a tough game. You better have a strong mind if you're not putting the work in, right? So that's
because there's an element of like, I know this, you don't need to lose an extra pound, but you actually need to be able to finish this workout and prove to yourself that this type of workout you couldn't do before and now that you can. And it's like a mental hurdle too.
It's a thing where you can have all the skill in the world, but before you step on the mat, am I ready or not ready? Like it's that sport you can't hide. You can play like any team game and you can be 1 of 11, 1 of 12, 1 of 5, and you can't maybe not have the best day, but you guys still win, right? You hit. Going into it, maybe I had a bad weight cut, and there's a lot of things you can't control, but did I do everything to get ready for this? And having some of that doubt in your mind, I mean, that's the biggest killer in the sport. And there's other people like, I told Tom this yesterday, like Tom, Roy Salger, I'd say, Randy Lewis, just people off the top of my mind, and Metcalf up until, maybe his last year or two, like at senior level. Were they that much better than everybody else? technically, no. But the thought of losing never even entered their mind. The what if game that you play with yourself. So not having that doubt or what if, they were just. I mean, they were never. The thought of losing would never even enter their mind, and that's a rare.
Who's the best wrestler you ever saw? Like, did you ever see Kale in person, or was there somebody better than Kale that you saw?
I mean, I think Kale's. I was in one of my good friends, Thomas Gilman, that went to.
He's got a mouth on him.
He did. I mean, that's another one that tried to project to try to be.
Well, that Waverly Nighthawk.
Yeah, but they sent him there. I
mean,
mean, you're right out of college. You're sending him to Dresser and Schwab, right? He just got second in the world. You know that Schwab and Dresser are going to poke at him. I mean, and that's just how he is. That was
great, by the way. It was just awesome.
It was great, but it's something you regret. I mean, you evolve. I mean, you learn from that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Cale Sanderson by far, and Cale Sanderson right now. I mean, he beats the shit out of David Taylor and Kyle Snyder. Like he's phenomenal. How Iowa State lost him was beyond me. But he could. I mean, in-state rivalry stuff. I think he's grown a lot as a coach then too. I think he puts on this front of this cool, calm, collected. He is one of the most, if not the most competitive human being. But how he projects on his athletes now as a coach versus what he did at Iowa State, I think is a lot better.
One thing that's unique about wrestling is the coaches are in the room. And they're working guys, and they're wrestling. Like Kyle Snyder and Cale Sanderson are wrestling one another. Are you still doing that? Like,
no. I mean, sometimes if I need to, but like, I can't go with those guys. I mean, to the workouts that they go through. I think right now, the less coaches roll with the athletes is better because. There's a myriad of reasons why, but it becomes a war. Like it's hard to put your shoes back on and actually like, okay, we're gonna wrestle, and your ego comes back.
Yeah,
and I think that's the, like any sport. Like I think Mike Tyson said this one time. Like they asked somebody who never coached, and he said, in order to be a great coach, your ego as a coach has to be dead, because if you're trying to seek fulfillment or any holes you had in your own personal career through your athletes, you're going to be flawed at some point. See, and we see that all the time.
You didn't ask, but I'm going to give you a coaching tip. See, what I do is when I was a wrestling coach, I would do all the conditioning and stuff, have the kids do all the conditioning. Then when they're totally worn out, then I would roll with them. So that's my coaching tip to you.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, you wrestled like 195 in college at the end.
Yeah, and weighed like 178.
Yeah, that's what you look like right now. You're still probably at your fighting weight, but
no, I'm not.
You just wait till the end of practice when they're all exhausted. Then you're like, all right, guys, one more, 1 minute go.
But you could. But
no, I wouldn't.
TJ still wrestles. I just. And a lot of it's more technical with the kids, but it's there's nothing to gain out of it. I mean, I rolled around with Keeter and those kind of guys, but first of all, if I blow a hamstring, I'll be out. You don't recover near as well as you used to. But I like to have that different mentor relationship with the kids.
Yeah, and I think wrestling is a unique sport. Like going back to that coaching point, we went to the Hawkeye Coaches Clinic one year as a staff, and we went in, and it was just after they were finishing a fall workout. So it's like,
shit.
Yeah, and it was like the start of their season. You know what I mean? Like they've been working out the whole time, but it's like season's about to start for them. And so we go in there, and obviously Gable was long retired, but Coach Gable is on like the Airdyne, and he's still grinding it out in sweats. And both Coach Tom and Terry, they're both soaked in sweat. Like they just got done practicing too. And you saw some of the guys some guys were kept working out throughout the whole coaches clinic in the background, just doing their own thing in their own world. But I mean, the coaches looked like they just got done working out. But I think wrestling is just unique in that way. And like, not that I would ever try to like wrestle to beat one of my wrestlers, but like you kind of do it with them.
You do that. I mean, sometimes you let the guys, you want to build the guy up, right?
Yeah.
Like, you get into situations that they're having troubles with and let them score and stuff. But there's a lot of guys that still have to exercise their demons and work out it, because if they don't, they become complete.
But part of it is like
psychopaths.
Coaching football. If a team beat us on this play, I line up the players and I give them a scout card, and they kind of run that play so the defense can see it or whatever. But almost as a wrestling coach, sometimes you have to be the other guy. Like, you have to do that thing. Like, this guy's going to do these kinds of things to you, and so you kind of get in there. And so I think wrestling is just a really unique sport to coach, because you have to still do it. You have to be a wrestler. It feels like
Yeah, but the amount of technology, just the amount of film that's available, we don't go to went to Who's Number One, and I mean, it's unique because we have five kids in the club right now that are top 7 of total pound for pound all weight classes in the club, right? So
incredible.
You go to Keter's going to the World Championships in Bulgaria in August. We'll go, in August we'll go. I mean, I'll know everybody that's at his weight class and watch 50 matches of them, right? And the thought is, that's my job as his coach, not to but prepare him, right?
Right.
If you're going to go into a boxing match or a fight with some guy and you don't know this guy has a hell of a right uppercut, and you walk in there, you're an idiot. I mean, that'd be on my part. You don't make it over, but they need to be aware, right? Situations. Okay, you get to here's kind of how it happens, and then they have to wrestle through it. We put them in a lot of situations, simulations of, well, okay, you're his partner, start here, kind of orchestrate that way.
What's the current state of wrestling? Because baseball, for instance, we've seen, and I'm not blaming Title IX on this, but it kind of came because of Title IX, where a lot of college baseball programs, had to be cut because of funding and because of, Title IX. Same thing with wrestling throughout the years. And now we see less baseball and wrestling programs. At the same time, it seems like college baseball is in a really good spot right now as far as exposure. The schools that have the programs are investing money in it. Wrestling seems like you guys have a really good thing going, like what you guys have going at these wrestling academies like Seabolt, and there's others that are out there, and what you and Tony Hager are doing, like you're bringing a lot of good attention on the sport. But what is the current state, in your opinion, Adam, of the sport of amateur wrestling?
It's isolated, if that makes sense. It's seasonal. Like the state of Iowa, you have the state tournament, right? It's geographical. It's in survival mode kind of right now. I mean, you have the top 5 to 10 programs. You have the top 2 or 3 conferences. Big Ten Conference moves the needle. They kind of carry the load. It's a non-revenue sport, right? It's a drain on any. It's the second lowest revenue sport of all in-state sports total.
What's the lowest?
Probably I think it's like horseback riding. Actually, that might be ahead of it. I don't know, but you have the little peaks of ESPN picks up here or there, but relative to growing it, okay. If I played for bank shot over at freaking St. Edmunds or Senior League, whatever, I understand baseball. There might be some nuances of the reviews or some this or that or some. But I can turn on the television and I can be a baseball fan because I can relate to that. It's hard to do for wrestling. It's hard to bring new fans in because the nuances of you don't have anybody you really connect with, right? Unless you went to university, or in the rules in the sport, it's not easy to bring new people in, and that's hard in anything.
Has UFC has fighting helped because now you have a lot of ex-wrestlers moving into this, and it's a contact sport?
I think there's some blips of it here and there, but if Askren, for example, I know Ben really well. Actually talked to Daniel today, he's getting inducted to the Hall of Fame tonight with Khabib. Is those guys, if Askren was from Iowa and he would have been right into the UFC and huge, right? Because the brand and following it. But he went to Missouri, right? 2-time Hodge, 4-time finalist. And people are just like, well, who's been Askren? He kind of started. There's still star power, right? I mean, University of Iowa by far. I mean, look at Daniel Dennis, NCAA runner-up. Look at Tony Ramos, one-time NCAA champ. Some of these guys' brand is by far polarizing over guys that are 3 or 4-time champs, maybe across the country. So Iowa wrestling, the state of Iowa wrestling is really the state of Iowa. You have Iowa State's doing really good. Kevin Dresser. They have a hell of a recruiting class, and of course you have Schwab at UNI. So like the state of college wrestling in Iowa, extremely good. High school wrestling, extremely good. They just had women's wrestling. They just changed the dual format, but that's not replicated across the country, because across the country wrestling's not near as important as the state of Iowa.
You got what? Iowa, Ohio, Pennsylvania, what? Oklahoma,
California, maybe, like just high school. But even like, what's the next step after wrestling? It'll make you go to the Olympics, maybe. Like, what percentage of players are foregoing college baseball to go right to the pros? But they really don't have a brand yet, most of them, right? Like, oh, he's a huge prospect, but you're losing him, like, foregoing college ball. He goes in the pros, right? You can still follow that player. In wrestling, it's like,
you got the Olympics, and you got so
it
much
gets so
downtime.
clotted, and like, okay, who's going where? And you only root like post collegiate. Most people, if they're not tied to a big college fan base, they're just kind of it. Mm-hmm. Jordan Burroughs would be an anomaly.
Yep.
I mean, look at Kyle Dake. If he was actually had a big college, Penn State, they do great in collegiate, but your brand will never be bigger than in wrestling as biggest as a collegiate.
Gable Steveson is maybe the most popular college wrestler I can remember since Kale. Am I right? Am I right or wrong there? He popped for me, like WWE, the whole thing.
Yeah, I think for non-wrestling people, Gable Steveson has a lot of brand recognition because of the WWE stuff or WWF or whatever. Like, but I think it also coincides with social media and the NIL stuff too. Like he came along at the right time, because like Brock Lesnar was kind of Gable Steveson before Gable Steveson.
Yeah.
So he gets the men out there, and then what's Vince do? Vince, I mean, he's going to come back and wrestle one more year. Gable, let's guarantee it. He says, okay, you look at the YouTube numbers and shit of WWE. It's like by far number one. If he can bring, they have 700,000 people watch the NCAA wrestling tournament. Okay, if he can bring 10% of those over to be new WWE customers, that's all incremental customers for him. So he'll cut him an NIL deal just to hoping he can transfer some of those customers over to new WWE fans.
Yeah,
it's that's kind of my wheelhouse. It's kind of been my wheelhouse professionally, but
what's been your wheelhouse professionally?
Consumer goods, just following the customer.
What does the Moonlight Graham Show need to be doing from a marketing standpoint to be?
I think we need more motorcycles. That's what's in the background. I think we need more motorcycles.
No, I think you guys are doing awesome. I mean, your guys' number of Twitter followers and stuff you guys set following and footprint where you guys get picked up is great. I think regardless, I think a lot of people can chase a lot of different things. I think you need to stay true to would you start this for? What was your intentions then? And if you keep that pure, at some point, whatever your things are breaking, everybody can have you can break through short term, here or there and chase shit. And then at the end of the day, you're not going to be happy with what you have for a product.
We'll sell out for Cosner, but that's it.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, probably could get Portnoy over here. I don't know. That's the phenomenon. It's just volume. I mean, most of this content being put out is just dog shit, but it's you have to be controversial, and it's clickbaity, right?
So what you've been doing,
you like to say real. You like to be pure. You like to tell stories. You like to, but I always say this: people are like, oh, make money. Go listen. Anybody that's chasing, if you think you got some new idea about making a quick buck that someone else hasn't thought about, you're an idiot. You never make money or chasing just money, right?
What type of feedback do you guys get? Because the wrestling community is opinionated, it's fiery, and I just got to imagine, like,
I don't really give a shit about the opinion. That's when I'm on there with Tony. It's like, like, if you're going to ask me a question, I'm just going to tell you the truth. Like, I would expect the same. I don't want you to tell me one thing and then, and then, I only meant this. Like, just be real. And you don't have to be blunt or brash unless it's against someone, maybe from Iowa State. But no, it's you need to be respectful. I think there's a lot of, I'm struggling with this now as a coach, and obviously when you coach your own kids, it's different. But the millennials, like, they watch a lot of stuff, right? Majority of their learnings and stuff is through social, it is through technology, and they're seeing a lot of these behaviors that they think are being approved, right? So they think that's how you operate. Meanwhile, they really struggle to have any real personal relationships or conversations with anybody. So it's all artificial. I think everybody's always watching. I'm not saying a cancel culture. I'm more worried about from a mentor standpoint of, well, coach, you said, you acted this way. Like it was like a blessing that's okay to operate that way. I worry about more that way.
Is it tough in this day and age, and you kind of already touched on this, like the sport of wrestling hasn't changed. What it took to be a good wrestler 50 years ago is still true of what it takes to be a good wrestler now. We have more data, we're smarter about it, all this other stuff, but like you still need the edge, you still need the technique, you still need the athleticism, all of those things are true. You still need the singular focus. Is it tougher today to get that across to a kid because they still need to have all of those same things that they did 50 years ago?
I think that the sport is the level of coaching is so much more advanced than when we wrestled. Like, so that's why you're seeing kids come right out of high school that were competing for Division I titles as true freshmen. We never saw that before. But the amount of distractions and things that pull them away from, I'm not saying singular focused, right? We had distractions. It was just maybe Nintendo or something. It wasn't near as engaging. Like there's real issues with millennial, like teens today of it's an addiction issue with social media and phone and the dopamine hit that they get from it, and that's how they deal with stress. They don't have conversations. It's hard. So getting, kid walks into practice and you think everything's great, but even if everything isn't great, they're still not going to come to you. You hope you can get to that level, but they don't have any of that kind of relationship in their life until it basically crashes. So there's as much, like this is probably cliche, but the best coaches or coach-athlete relationships is sometimes not just the X's and O's. It's showing that you're invested in their life outside of the sport. That's really where the trust builds.
Tom, how often are you investing in the lives of your 7th grade football team?
Well, it's 8th grade.
Oh, it's 8th grade.
First of all, come on.
But you got to start developing relationships in 7th grade.
No, as a teacher and stuff, I think that Adam's exactly right. Like I think I like something you said a minute ago. It's like we had distractions too. It's just their distractions are more engaging. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that little nugget. You should tweet that or something. But no, I think just working with teenagers today and whether it's a high-level academic student or athletics, like those kids I think they're high-strung, and I don't think they're super good at coping with that. I don't think they do a good job relating or explaining or discussing. I think they do go to social media. I think they do isolate into their phone more and stuff. I mean, you literally are working with some of the top athletes in the nation, literally at Seabolt. So as you're going through, like, your recruitment was really different, but like as those kids are going through that recruiting process, especially like Keeter, somebody who really is one of the top kids in the country, how do you mentor, guide, facilitate, support that when it's like it's a club? Like he still has to go back to Iowa City, for instance, or those kids have to go home. You're a part of their life, but how do you kind of mentor, coach, guide kids through that?
First of all, I think you've got to work with their other coaches, right? So it's a balance. It doesn't become the worst thing I hate about. Well, it's my kid, right? Like you don't own the kid. Like it's not possession. You're not staking claim of the kid. Understanding, like you go back to what you said about high performing students or athletes is like who's determining what success and performance looks like. A lot of times, it's not the athlete or the student. It's their parents, right? This is what success looks like. They don't even really know what success looks like in their eyes. They're just not wanting to fail, right? So you talk about like kids having a worry of failure. They're not performing at their level. A lot of that's done before created not by them, but by people around them, and then they become less apt to put themselves out there. Like Kobe Bryant says, there's never failure unless you don't try, and I truly do believe that. Like that. In order to grow in anything, you've got to fail. You got to put yourself out there. It's easy to play money more quarterback, but the people that put themselves out there are usually people that be successful. Parents coaches, social media, community. I mean, there's as many people as you think. I always tell a lot of kids this. A lot of people you think are in your corner are the same people that want to see you maybe stumble, because then it kind of justifies where they're at in levels in life. And it sucks, but it's real. And you try not to project on the kids so they can. I try to just be just not even coach, but just make him aware of what's going on around life. Like I tell Keeter, like you can't be a yes man to everybody. You can't be baseball and here. Like you gotta talk for yourself sometimes. And on top of all that, you still have to make time for yourself to be a kid. In school, like I always tell the kid, you can't. Thomas Gilman quote is, "You can't be a shitty human being and think you're going to be a good wrestler. At some point, it's going to catch up to you, right? You can't have bad everyday habits and think like, okay, I'm going to cut corners on everything I do as a functioning human being, but I'm going to be a good wrestler. It doesn't work that way, or a good baseball player, or anything else. But a lot of that's in their environment, right? And as parents, I mean, myself, you catch yourself with my own kids, which is hard as hell to coach. So I try to back off on all that. Is you try to keep your kids' expectations, and sometimes you don't keep yourself to the same ones. So you catch yourself being a hypocrite. I mean, it's real. And, sometimes when your 14-year-old son says, well, Dad, what about? It's like, yeah, you're right. You want to get pissed off, but they're right. You know what I mean?
I love that, what you just said. When you were 21 years old and you're at the University of Iowa, like, were you living by that same code, or is that something that you understood through maturation? Maturation.
I think everybody, you make mistakes, you evolve. The biggest thing is that as a parent or a coach, my wife and I think you talk about, like, we want to limit the number of regrets our kids have. Right? Not saying that you don't want them to fail. Failure is one thing. Regrets when you make a conscious decision on something that goes against what you say you wanted and affected the result, right? Regrets something that you never get rid of.
Yeah.
I would say, like, people leave wrestling, or I would say I wrestling 3 different buckets. One is you leave the national champ, you're happy, fulfilled all your dreams. Second is that you leave, you don't take any accountability. It's somebody else's problem, you got screwed. And third is, bucket I fell in, and I think majority of people, you look down 2-3 years down the road, whenever in your life, look at yourself like, man, I really, my priorities really weren't in where they needed to be, and I kind of pissed away the biggest opportunity. And you either learn from that and fall forward and apply it going forward, or you live in the past of, oh, I was this and I could have done this, or I went here or whatever. I'll tell people like, oh, I wrestled Iowa. That's not who I am as a human being. It's something I did in life, but that's not who I am.
Your own son, your oldest, is entering high school, right?
Yeah, I'll be a freshman.
And he's a stud wrestler. He's a really successful kid.
He's pretty good.
What's he weigh now? He was a little guy.
Oh, I don't know. I think
120 or
no, he'll probably wrestle like 38 or 45.
Okay. So, like, as he's getting ready for high school, how do you start preparing him? Obviously he's your son, but, like, how do you treat him versus, a kid you're coaching, or, how do you see that?
It's way easier to coach other kids. Just because you see them every day, right? Like, you see decisions and you can helicopter, like, you can micromanage to a fault where, and being completely honest, like, it becomes damaging within your relationship. And like the last 12, 18 months, I've been really conscious to be his dad, not his coach.
Nice.
Right? And it's hard, man. Like, you're in the room, like, like that ride home, that, that cliche of the ride home. If people really look yourself in the mirror, it's like, that's real, and my wife, she said, well, someone followed you around all day, time you got up, time you went to bed, and told you everything you did wrong, right? Or what you could have done better. Like, what kind of relationship are you going to have?
Did you call it a marriage?
Well,
I'm just kidding.
There was a commercial not too long ago. It was like a dad and his daughter, and they were like coming home from a basketball tournament, and the teenage daughter was not talking to the dad because the dad was obviously the coach, and that and I remember the first time I saw the commercial, I was like, this is a stupid commercial. And then the second time I saw the commercial, I was like, wait a minute, I've been that daughter 1,000 times, and that is the most awkward car ride, like as a kid, right? Just because you hate it, you hate the critique. You got like an hour of like every walk you had, every turnover you made, and all that stuff, and like, not saying my dad was an abusive dad or it, but like we would do that thing, and it got to be hard.
And then you don't want to go to him for just everyday stuff because, like,
well,
I'm never gonna be. It's never gonna be. I'm just gonna be the same speech you got about basketball, right?
So yeah, to that point, I'm interested because I think there's a balance there, and I'm just curious about the balance of being coach and dad, because I still have a great relationship with my dad. I had a great relationship with my dad then, but he was also not overly hard on me, but hard on me, and he coached me too. And I think about it all the time because as a kid, I never thought about it. That was just my reality. I never thought that like my dad is playing multiple roles. I just thought that's what my dad did, And I think about it now as like when you are the dad, you have to consciously, like what you're just sharing, think about how you're handling this situation, because as a competitor, as a guy with an ego, as all of these things, you realize how quickly all of that stuff can get out of hand.
I think it comes back to like what your core principles of character you want your kids to be raised with, right? What's important, whether it's academics, whether that's how they interact with people in the neighborhood, whether that's athletics. You try to instill the same core characteristics and principles you want your kids. So yeah, I'm going to hold you accountable to this because here's the standard that we have as a family. And I think if you're consistent with that, but also living it, like I said earlier, it's easy to like, well, maybe I shouldn't have said that, and you catch yourself at. But I think it's also good to maybe screw up in front of your kids sometimes to show it's okay to make a mistake as long as you own up to it.
I think a unique thing for you and your son, or in lots of different places, like your dad and you with baseball, like you did it at a really high level, you're around it at a really high level, and now you're watching your son do the thing and I'm at like a different stage. My kids are younger. Watching my daughter play softball is weird because I played baseball, and so I know that game a little better. And watching my son, he's only 6, but he's just getting started with wrestling, and like I've coached wrestling, I've been around really good wrestlers. Like my advice, I bite my coach tongue when I know what's going on, and I really focus on my parent and just say like, I am so proud of you. You worked so hard. I really focus on like those things. But then when I watch my kids swim, I can't swim. So now my kids are in swimming, and it's like, way to go! I'm so proud of you. Yeah. But my wife was a swimmer, and my wife was a basketball player. Those are her worlds, and so when she watches those sports a little bit differently, and I think as a parent, I think what you said, like, what are the things you expect consistently? The character, like we expect effort, we expect listening to your coaches, things like that. So like those are the things you can really emphasize. But I think it is harder. Like if your son was like a standout basketball player, that would probably be really different. But with your oldest son being a standout wrestler, I think you do have to focus more on that aspect of the relationship.
I think you try to give them as many opportunities, understand it. Also have conversations of where do they want to go with it, not where you want them to go with it, right? Mm-hmm. And as they grow up, everybody's aligned in the household. Like, okay, what are your goals? Like, where do you want to go? Then you try to give them as many opportunities to fulfill where they want to go, and what they do with them is up to them along the way. But making sure that you're also checking back into saying, okay, well, you said this is what you wanted. Here's what we aligned on, right? So it's not like, well, here's your plan. Mm-hmm. Like it's like anything, whether it's employee at work or even athletics. When people feel like that they have a little bit of skin in the game of what gets done, they're a hell of a lot more apt to go after it.
I was able to just step aside because I had Tony Hager as our youth coach, so I already knew my son was getting the best.
Sorry to hear that.
I didn't have to say anything.
Sorry to hear that.
I coached Tony.
Oh, Hager. He's done a great job for the state of Iowa and the kids, though.
Adam, we end every episode of the Moonlight Graham Show with the 5 big questions.
All right.
First question.
I'm not scared of your slider. He had a good high kick too.
You don't need to be scared of the slider.
He played a hell of a shortstop.
Need to be afraid of that high and tight fastball.
Yeah.
First question: all-time favorite teammate.
Wow. All-time favorite teammate. Wow, that's a hard one. Holy shit, I got about 3 of them. Trent Goodell.
And why?
Because at the like when a lot of times when you're done, and staying connected and still in contact, and all the core principles of why you have a friend now. It's not, you don't just have commonality just about the sport. It's also about your families, and not you're not sitting around having stories about, well, remember when we did this? It's, you're still involved in each other's life.
From Fort Dodge, best when you go back to Fort Dodge, what's the one restaurant you got to hit up before you leave town?
I mean, it's got probably Tico.
Tico, J. Mars, Tom
Tico.
Thumb, good options.
Tico. I love that warmed up smothered Sancho.
Yeah. Isn't it funny, by the way, you played on like the bank shot. We're talking about bank shot. People have no idea what we're talking about. This is a pool hall, and for a former pool hall. It's
All
been
by
closed
Tom
down.
Thumb, right?
That is now, it was sponsoring a little league team.
Exactly.
But could you imagine the things that probably went on at bank
Yeah,
shot?
there was some illegal gambling going on.
Oh, I mean, fights, gambling.
One of the guys' grandpas owned it. I forget the kid who was.
Always in the championship game was the Brass Monkey.
Yeah,
that bar.
Solid one.
Wow.
Top Hat had a real competitive team for a lot of years.
What was the last time you were in a fight? Like not in the wrestling room, outside of a
No
wrestling room
comment.
fight.
No comment.
Within the last decade.
Yes.
He was late getting here tonight.
Yeah.
No, just kidding.
I was so sweaty when I got here.
What is one piece of advice that you would give yourself, 20 years ago, let's say you're 38, 39 years old now.
Yep.
What piece of advice does the 39-year-old Adam Fellers give the 18-year-old Adam Fellers?
Enjoy the moment. Like that live, like, you know, there's a Jim Rodenborn, like,
Oh, yeah, Hawkeye glove.
what a great human being. When Rex passed away and he got up and gave that speech about, I get choked up saying this. He said when they found out they were pregnant with Rex that they had to do some gene testing. He was either going to come out, didn't know if he could have mental disability or it's going to be a genius, right? IQ-wise. He ended up coming out with an IQ genius, and they called it, that was his gift. And I'll never forget when Jim said that when your day comes and you're standing at the gates of heaven and you look and God looks down and says, what did you do with the gift I gave you? And that amount of gratitude and just being thankful for every day. And, you know, a lot of times we have tragedy and shit, stuff go wrong in our lives to try to appreciate things. Jim Rodenborn I don't know how many years ago that was. I'll never forget that. Just be thankful. Like, you know, it's easy. That's so cliche to say, like, oh, you know, just really enjoy it. But do you really enjoy it? Like, at the end of the day, what's really tough in your life, like, compared to a lot of other things going on?
Yeah,
Hey, look what we're doing here, sitting and enjoying this.
When Rex passed, we actually did a little episode on the podcast.
I listened to it.
And I'll tell the story again because it just speaks to the type of kid that Rex was. He's just a really special kid. And he was a senior when my brother Neil was a freshman. And Rex was a pretty good runner and was the miler on the team that whole season. And then my brother Neil was just a freshman, but was pretty good. And Neil helped out with a lot of relays throughout the season. But then when it came time for districts, Neil was kind of the odd man out because all the seniors got the relay spots. And so Neil was not going to run at state because all the seniors got the spots. And then Rex was a senior, and this would have been his last track meet, gave up his spot in the mile so my freshman brother Neil could run in the mile. And, you just don't see that type of, I don't know.
It's legacy.
Yeah. And you never forget that. And, you know, sports aren't the whole thing, but that little story I think speaks a lot to how special a kid Rex was.
Unbelievable.
And I love telling it all the time because it's how Rex lives on.
Yeah, I mean, that's continues to touch lives. And on top of that, you know, I've had some other things happen in my life. Is make sure you're making time for people to call back when, you know, we're always so busy, but we're not too busy, you know.
Yeah.
So Thank you for having me. I
Adam,
appreciate it.
thanks so much for coming over. It's great seeing you.
Thank you.
Tommy,
Thank you.
this has been fun.
Very fun.
Thank you for listening to today's episode with Adam Fellers. And, we talk about Jim Zaleski being the head coach for the University of Iowa during Fellers' time at Iowa. And, of course, Zaleski succeeded Dan Gable, and Gable had probably the greatest collegiate coaching run of any coach in any sport ever. So coming in after him is almost an impossible job because keeping the bar at the same level that Gable had it is almost near impossible, like I said. So Zaleski comes in 97, and just as a recap of who Jim Zaleski is, because I feel like sometimes we're talking about him like he was a nobody. This guy was a two-time state champ in high school out of Shueyville High School in Iowa. At the University of Iowa, where he wrestled, he was a three-time NCAA champion. He was Gable's assistant for 7 Big Ten championships, 6 NCAA championships. Himself, as a head coach, they won the national championship. Iowa did in 98, 99, 2000. They were runner-up in 2001 and 2004 with him at the helm. And if this is any other wrestling school, there's probably a statue of Jim Zaleski as well. I mean, he had a really great 9-year run as the Iowa head coach, but of course it was not up to that same bar, that same standard that Gable had it. And I just wanted to point that out here, looking back on Zaleski's resume, as we're talking about him here and as we're remembering what Iowa wrestling was like during that Fellers era. It might sound like it was a major step back, but the Hawkeyes were still very, very good. They just maybe weren't as automatic and dominant as they were during that Gable era. So Jim Zaleski, Hall of Famer, one of the greatest wrestlers and wrestling coaches in American history, and also coming out of the state of Iowa. I think he was one of the top 100 athletes we had ever to come out of the state of Iowa when we did that just a couple of years ago. So thank you guys for listening to the episode this week. Thanks, of course, to the Moonlight Graham Show team, Brian Sandvig, Tom Griffin, Brennan Gargano, my brothers Andy and Neil. Have a great week, Moonlighters.
It's Moonlight Graham, yeah. It's a pretty good program, broadcasting to the heartland. Sports stories for the everyman. It's Moonlight Graham, yeah. Please follow us on Instagram. You're loving us on Twitter too. You download every pod we do. It's Moonlight Graham.